In the 1970s, a radical academic theory emerged for Western universities. The claim was severe. The Prophet Muhammad did not actually exist in the 7th century, scraping away the timeline of his life as an invention. Led by historians like Patricia Crone, this revisionist school hypothesized that early Islam was constructed much later in late antiquity, fabricated decades or even a full century after the traditional death date of 632 CE. This theory creates a massive historical void. It demands we erase the timeline, covering the post-632 era in an exclusion zone of missing data. To test this, we apply the historical critical method, adopting constraints set by these skeptical historians. That means completely discarding all internal Islamic theological texts. We will not use the Quran, the Hadith, or the biographical Sirah. We will rely strictly on external, secular evidence. The acceptable evidence for this fruscast is rigidly defined: contemporaneous non-Muslim manuscripts, physical epigraphy, radiocarbon dating, and early numismatics. If the revisionists are correct, the external historical record for the 7th century should be completely blank. If they are wrong, this strictly secular data will inadvertently form an unbreakable proof of the traditional religious timeline. We begin in the early 7th century Levant, looking through the lenses of the Roman and Persian empires. The first external evidence is a Syriac text, the fragments of the Arab conquest, securely dated to 636 CE, just 4 years after the prophet's traditional death. The fragment provides a direct, localized report of a military engagement, specifically documenting a battle involving a group it calls the Arabs of Muhammad. The second data point arrives shortly after. It is the Chronicle of 640, recorded by Thomas the Presbyter a mere 8 years post-632. He notes the precise geographic movements of the Arab forces near Gaza, specifically naming them the Taya of Muhammad. These are not mythological texts or hidden relics. They are physical manuscripts housed in institutions like the British Library, accessible to any modern historian. The third piece of documentation comes from the 660s, written by the Armenian bishop Sebios. He records highly precise sociological details: a merchant named Muhammad who preached Abrahamic monotheism and legislated strict laws prohibiting carrion, wine, and fornication. We have 3 distinct, non-Muslim, external documentary sources recorded within 30 years of the subject's life. Virtually no other ancient religious figure, including Jesus of Nazareth, possesses this density of contemporaneous, hostile source attestation. Moving from written chronicles to physical archaeology, we turn to numismatics, the study of coins, which serve as an entirely unbiased ledger of state power. Revisionists often argue that because early Islamic empires did not immediately mint entirely new, exclusively Islamic currency, the religion itself must have been unformed. The physical evidence shows something far more strategic. The earliest Islamic coins are amalgamations. They retain traditional Roman or Persian imperial iconography, but introduce specific Arabic text, like the Bismillah. This was an act of economic pragmatism. The expanding state overstamped existing minting machinery, because forcing an entirely new, unrecognizable currency across a vast, newly conquered territory would guarantee total economic collapse. Retaining familiar economic symbols while injecting new theological markers demonstrates highly organized, pragmatic statecraft. It proves administrative competence, not an unformed religious identity. Transitioning to organic material, we have the discovery of the Birmingham Quran manuscript. Oxford researchers subjected this parchment to rigorous radiocarbon analysis. The results date the material to between 568 and 645 CE with a 95% probability. That specific scientific date range directly overlaps with the traditional recorded lifespan of the Prophet Muhammad. Both the pragmatic coinage in the Levant and the scientifically dated parchment in the archives systematically dismantle the late invention theory. The complex Islamic identity was present at the origin point. Faced with early physical evidence, a modern branch of revisionism attempts to displace Islam geographically, arguing its true origins lie far north of Mecca. Researcher Dan Gibson hypothesized that early mosques actually faced Petra in Jordan, attempting to recenter the religion's geographic origin based on early architectural alignments. Secular historians and astronomers quickly dismantled this. Early 7th century builders did not possess modern geographic coordinates. They used folk astronomy and solar solstices to determine the Qibla, rendering Gibson's calculations historically invalid. A complex textual anomaly is found in Stephen Shoemaker's work, analyzing the nativity story of Jesus in chapter 19 of the Quran. Shoemaker discovered that the Quran's highly specific details regarding Mary and the miraculous palm tree perfectly match a highly obscure, localized 1st century Christian liturgy. This specific configuration of the nativity tradition was practiced almost exclusively at the Kathisma Church, located just outside of Jerusalem. Shoemaker argues the Quran must have been compiled much later, outside Arabia, by a conglomerate of authors with direct access to the specific Jerusalem church. This alone creates a severe information paradox. How could a committee of late antiquity fabricators accurately source a hyper-localized 1st century liturgy that wasn't widely known even among surrounding Christian populations? The presence of this geographic and liturgical data in an early Arabic text defies standard academic models of late-stage tampering. The necessary transmission mechanisms to fake this detail simply do not exist in the secular record. When revisionists dig into the text to prove it was altered, they surface historical anomalies. These highly localized data points are better explained by the traditional claim: continuous, ancient prophetic transmission. When we repopulate the timeline with external data, the revisionist void shatters. The Syriac texts, the numismatics, and the radiocarbon dates firmly lock the origins of Islam into the early 7th century. By relying entirely on external secular data, Western historians bypass the internal methodology. Islamic scholars used to preserve their own history, the isnad. Isnad is a continuous, unbroken chain of biographical custody. Every individual node in the network is vetted for character, geographic overlap, and precise memory retention. It is a highly structured architecture of human transmission. Contrast this network approach against Western historical criticism, which relies heavily on inferential heuristics to piece together the past. One of their primary tools is the criterion of embarrassment. The logic of this criterion dictates that if a text records something awkward or embarrassing about its hero, it is likely historically accurate, because a later fabricator would have simply deleted the flaw. When modern historians apply this secular heuristic to traditional Islamic texts, they frequently find passages that meet the criterion perfectly. Applying the skeptical tool actually validates the traditional texts, creating a double layer of historical proof. Skeptical historiography is designed to dismantle myth, but when applied with total rigidity to the 7th century, the sheer weight of the external data forces the academy to retreat. The secular stress test ultimately validates the foundational timeline of early Islam.